We'll start with the course content. There are four domains primarily. Okay. um, Information security governance, information security risk management, information security program development and management, and information security incident management. And each of these domains would have some weightage from 17, 20, 33, and 30% respectively. However, as I always tell people who attend my training sessions, do not pay much of a heed to these weightages. If you are making sure that you're following the right kind of tips, if you're making sure that you're going through and all the content and preparing well, and as part of the practice exams that you and mock exams that you go ahead and attend and take before the actual exam, if you are making sure that you're consistently maintaining a specific number of answers and above, then you don't really have to worry about this, because at the end of the day, uh, what I primarily emphasize on, yes, we all are aiming to clear the exam, but after that, what? A majority of us basically go through the exam, and then after that you also would have to clear interviews, and then start performing or being acting as an information security manager. So that's the reason why, if you go through a specific weightage, then it might not really help you. So I say this keeping that aspect in mind. Okay. So what is the exam structure? There are 150 multiple choice questions which you have to complete within a 4 hours of time, and all of these are multiple choice questions only. If somebody gives you as part of a practice test something like a fill in the blanks or match the following kind of stuff, please do not fall for that. I've never seen any exam so far of CISM, at least in the last 4 to 5 years, where people have been given anything else but multiple choice, right? So there are four options, and of the four options, there is only one correct answer that you have to select. Okay, again, select all that apply, even that won't be there, that option won't be there. And generally 4 hours is enough for 150 questions. So even if you are looking at 160 questions, it's about 40 questions per hour, right? So it's less than 40 questions per hour. What I would generally recommend people to go through is take a break after uh, every hour. Okay, that way you would be able to pace things nicely, as well as you don't really have to stress much. And as such also, if you are practicing to answer questions at a very fast pace, even if you are doing 50 questions per hour, then you would complete things within 3 hours. And if you really want to review stuff, you could still do it in the remaining 1 hour, right? You don't have to rush. That's one thing that I would definitely recommend. You don't have to rush. uh, at the end of the day, everybody is you know answering for themselves, attempting the examination for themselves. If two or three of you are booking the exam together, there is no competition there. The competition should be who all are basically clearing the exam, right? And as far as clearing the examination is concerned, uh, you would get the result immediately displayed. The details of your scoring, etc., would be delivered to you within 2 to 3 weeks of time, generally about 2 weeks. Because there are four domains, there is a weighted scale score. So, how things would be calculated, no one knows. Okay, however, the score is between 200 to 800. You need to get an average of 450 or higher. The way things are calculated is something which is not known to anyone, right? It's a some kind of a weighted average, which is known only to ISACA, right? And at the proctor center, whoever is conducting to, but otherwise no one else is aware of it. And as I said, 150 questions. If you are practicing, and whenever you are practicing, if you're consistently making sure that you're scoring about 130, 135 regularly or above, of course, regularly, then you don't really have to worry about any of that, right? Now, there is a difference between passing the exam and getting certified. This particular exam and the certification, it is for experienced people. So there are requirements that you need to have at least 5 years of verified experience in the field of information security, specifically in those domains, right? At least two domains you should have 5 years of experience. So after you complete the exam and pass the exam is where you have to apply for certification, right? So you can pass the exam. If you think that you do not have the required experience, right, you could still wait for a period of 5 years. A maximum of 5 years is given by ISACA to you to go ahead and request for certification, which means that, like, let's say in 2025, if you clear the exam, then you have time till 2030, okay, to actually go ahead and apply for certification and claim the certification. Okay, and all of this information is available on ISACA's website. Okay, now we will move to the exam. Okay, now this particular exam, because it is for experienced people, it is a test of your judgment, most importantly your understanding of terms, right? Even more important is making sure that you go through the glossary. Okay, the glossary that is there at the end of the review manual, make sure that you are going through it, because you need to be able to understand what each and every term means, right? Because it is English, and if your communication skill is very good, do not fall prey to the fact that, okay, it would be an English term. Sometimes what you think a specific term is vis-a-vis what the term is used as far as Isaka is concerned, okay, they may be different, right? So I would always recommend, please go through the glossary at the end of the review manual. Make sure that you are getting yourself very, very well acquainted with the terms, right? Because if you do not understand the terms, then there is a highly likely chance that you will get the answer wrong for that particular question. Okay, again, as I said, it is all basis your experience, how much you have practiced, how much you are able to understand the question, how much you are able to uh, pick what is correct versus what could be avoided, what could be eliminated, right? Most of the times, and we would go through that, the answers or the question itself, right, would be forcing you to pick the best of whatever that is there. And in fact, you would find those terms, right, uh, like, if there is a question which you would get, and of course we will go through a question, okay, uh, if it is about risk, overall risk management, okay, what all aspects are there as far as risk management is concerned, okay. And if you are talking about risk management, different aspects of risk management, different steps of risk management, what exactly is risk identification, okay, what comes after risk identification, okay, what would you do as part of risk evaluation. You need to be able to understand that part. Okay, you don't have to memorize stuff, you don't have to mug stuff up, but your overall uh, ability to understand and register these things is very, very important. Okay, so if you are able to do it, that is where you will be able to triage the questions. Okay, this is the first thing, this is the next thing, this is the next thing, okay, this would be the last. So irrespective of what exactly is asked as part of the question, you will be able to give the right answer. Okay, and one of the most trickiest part is those questions where an entire paragraph will be basically be given to you as a scenario, and the question would be something else altogether, right? So be patient enough, at the same time do practice of reading the questions completely, and making sure that you're not missing anything. Okay, and of course, as I said, there is usually enough time. I've never heard about anybody running out of time as far as CISM is concerned. Okay, so it's better that you take a break. And most importantly, as far as the answers are concerned, generally whenever they are asking the question as to what is the best method, what is the most important aspect, what is the primary thing that you do, whenever these kind of questions come in, uh, generally there is more than one correct answer there. Okay, and what you are supposed to do is find the one which is most encompassing, as in which one basically covers everything. Like for example, if you say that if you really want to make sure that you include right to audit as part of a document, where is it that you would put it as part of? They will definitely give you options like statement of work, service level agreement, etc., etc., etc. Okay, non-confident, non-disclosure agreement, exact, etc. These kind of things would be there. Okay, so if you really look at it, statement of work versus a service level agreement, right? So you would definitely pick up something which is like a service level agreement, because generally that is more broader, right? That document basically covers everything as far as a specific service is concerned. So there are those kind of things which would basically be given to confuse you. So pay very close attention to that. Okay, and there are certain substitute words which would be used. If they're using criticality, then they are talking about importance. If they are talking about sensitivity, they're speaking about confidentiality. If they're speaking about impact, they're speaking about what exactly is the consequence, right? So do remember these things. Okay, very very important. Similarly, how you would calculate annual loss expectancy, how what exactly is the cost of a safeguard. Okay, there would be certain standard questions which generally they won't miss as part of the exam. So do make sure that you remember these stuff, right? And never make any assumptions, and always stay within the question, right? So there would, because if there is a question, do not map questions to your work environment. What is it that you do as part of your work, as part of your day-to-day activity? That's not why you are being tested there, right? And you don't have to get the entire world into that one specific question. It's very important that you remain within that question. Forget about everything, unlearn. As far as the exam is concerned, unlearn whatever that you folks do as part of your daily work. Okay, and then these are the ones which I was talking about, certain terms which are used as part of the questions. What is the most, best, primary, first, main, greatest, least, right? So there would be an emphasis. Whenever there is an emphasis, please make sure that you're going through the answers which are given to you. Okay, and that is where you would be able to, and I'm sure most of you would have already started practicing, and those who have not started practicing yet, you would find whenever these kind of questions come, right? If you are able to triage those questions, as to start giving a reason to yourself, justify to yourself why you would pick an answer. Make sure when you are giving answers to whichever question that is flashed in front of you on the screen, make sure that you are doing that justification. Okay, why would you pick one and why would you not pick the other? And once you start reasoning with yourself, and when you start getting into that habit of doing it, you will be able to pick the right answer most of the times. The probability, or basically the frequency of you picking the right answer in those kind of questions where you would arrive at, one of these two is the answer, right? Slowly you will start arriving at those two, eliminating the other two, and slowly your chances of picking the right answer would slowly start increasing, right? And as and when you are continuously hitting that, 130, 135 kind of marks of 150 questions, make yourself comfortable and give yourself that confidence that yes, I think I'm ready to give the exam. But before that, I would say, please be very wary if you are, taking that chance. Okay, so this is something which I would say is in terms of the some of the terms which are given to you. And then there are certain other aspects, certain other hints which would basically be given to you. Okay, first of all, as I mentioned with respect to risk management as a process, right? When what exactly is risk identification versus risk treatment, okay, or risk response. Okay, so what comes first, what comes in the last, okay, and what comes next, or what exactly is the sequence? Make sure that you understand that those aspects, and look at the activity. If there is something which is being discussed as part of, or if there is any activity which is being highlighted as part of that question, pay very clear focus to that. As in, if let's say you're talking about somebody is developing a policy, vis-a-vis somebody has already developed a policy, or somebody has actually approved the policy after the approval, these three are three different aspects. So the exam basically sometimes tests your English and your focus, right? So how exactly you would be able to understand what exactly is going on as part of that question, right? And then there would be certain questions which are outcome oriented, like if you do this, then what is expected? Like if you do risk assessment, what is it that you would get? What would you find? And what it would basically result in. So okay, fine, I have identified the risk, I have analyzed the risk, I have evaluated the risk, and after that, what would I do? I will have to treat the risk. Basically, after doing risk analysis and risk evaluation, what do I see? What exactly are the aspects which would you would basically look at as part of this entire activity? Okay, and then another aspect is, this is more a practical aspect that I would do as part of my daily work. Okay, just because something is written doesn't mean it is happening. You will have to definitely make sure that you verify that, check and verify. Okay, and then focus on the focus on risk assessment aspect, right? If somebody is not doing something that they are supposed to do, a rule doesn't mean that, if you are not following the rule does not mean that the organization is always getting impacted. Okay, because you would always get a question that, okay, what if I don't follow the rule, what's the harm? And that's why you have to look at the risk. Sometimes, let's look at it this way. If you take a password, for example, the length of a password, the complexity of a password, okay, in there was a time where a password with 8 characters, okay, with just alphanumeric would have been enough. Today, many organizations moved that to 12 or 15 alphanumeric with special characters. Okay, should not be a person's name itself, and so on, so forth. Many other complexities, and even when they were little skeptical, they've added second factor authentication, right? MFA also they've basically done. So you will have to look at risk element, and you need to look at what exactly is the impact to the organization whenever you are reading any question. Next, another guideline that I would always look at is, if there is a plan for a specific problem, like there is a problem, you already know what needs to be done, then initiate that particular plan. Okay, if you're talking about, and there would be a question or two that you would find as to, who among the following uh, roles in the organization is correct or best suited to sponsor information security within the enterprise, right? Let's look at, like, for example, CEO, COO, CISO, and CIO. Who according to you is the best suited person to sponsor information security? Make sure that you are aware of that hierarchy. How would you differentiate, right? And that's exactly what I was talking about, Omio. Okay, so in this case, CEO is always the highest. Okay, ceo COO reports to CEO, CISO or CIO, they basically report to somebody, either CEO or COO, depending on the organization. Or in some many organizations, CISO reports to CIO also. So this is what, when you look at governance, the very first domain, this is what governance basically focuses on: organization structure, organization culture, ethics, code of conduct. Right, these are the topics that you, when you go through domain one, this is what it would cover. Okay. And if somebody is giving you the answer or option as senior management or board of directors, let's look at it this way: who is better suited, board of directors, COO, CISO and CRO? Then who is best suited to sponsor? In this case, it is the board of directors, because generally they are the highest level. And who better than the board of directors? Right. And because we've given answer to two questions as senior management or board of directors or CEO, doesn't mean that it's the same thing is applicable. So there may be question which would basically confuse you, giving the same kind of question, similar looking question. The answer may not be that. Of course, we will cover a couple of examples there as well. Okay. Next part is, if you're looking at any question which gives you best practices, international standards, industry best practices, whenever these kind of answers are given, please be wary of those responses. Okay. If you want to basically do something, if you want to convince management to invest in information security, why would you basically convince them to invest in information security? Because that is industry best practice, there is a regulation for that. Okay, there is a, aligning with international best standards, because your competitors are doing it. I mean, the best practices, industry standards, competitors are doing it is least of the management's concern. If there is a regulation, and if a regulation is mandating me to do something, I would rather do that. Why? Because I want to make sure, as a board of directors, because they are putting the money there, they have pulled in the money from the market, right? They want to give the best to the stakeholders and the shareholders, of course to themselves, right? So make sure you get the overall organization's context, and this is where it is going to help you understand what basically is management's role, and what basically is every other department's role in the context of information security. And when you go through domain one emphasizes on all these elements, right? And as I mentioned, management is not the answer for all sorts of questions, right? If there is a question which says who is ultimately responsible or ultimately accountable, right, then that's senior management. Okay. Management is responsible to ensure that you or somebody else will do the work. Management won't do it. Like for example, you as a CISO, you would have to ensure, as an information security manager, you will have to ensure certain activities are performed by somebody, right? Similarly, as the senior management and as the board, their responsibility will be to make sure that people are doing what they are supposed to do, empowering them that they are supposed to do. If IT, HR, finance, sales, these organizations or these departments are fighting amongst themselves, then it's senior management's responsibility to resolve those issues and make sure that everybody is working as one and working towards the common goal of the organization, right? They are the ones who are providing the required support to ensure that the organization is secured. They will own the policies, they will provide the oversight, they will make sure that due care is taken. So that would be a question or two that you may get: what is due care versus what is due diligence? So right, so management's responsibility is to make sure that they adhere or they do due care vis-a-vis everybody else's within the organization should make sure that they go with due diligence. Okay, so understanding which is a superset versus which is a subset again goes back to the terms. Okay, any questions so far, folks? So this is basically what the guidelines are, that I would say please focus on these guidelines whenever you are preparing. And once you start preparing with these, keep with these guidelines in mind, obviously you would build in that memory in your mind. Your mind will start sensing any kind of a pitfall, and you would have trained your mind to accordingly answer accordingly. Okay, let's basically move to questions. So first sample question, as we spoke, one of the scenarios is timeline. Okay, at which point will decision be made to accept a risk? Identification, assessment, analysis, evaluation. D is it's the correct answer. So you are basically uh, you are basically deciding to accept the risk after you evaluate the risk. So yeah, that's a give yourself a pat on your back. It's the right answer. Okay, so basically different phases of risk. Okay, so as part of your risk identification, you are identifying the risk. As part of risk analysis, you are analyzing the risk where you're quantifying the risk. And as part of risk evaluation is where you are seeing if whatever risk that you have analyzed, whatever is the resultant risk value that you got, you put that against the acceptable risk level and check it is if it is acceptable or not. So if the analyzed risk is at the acceptable level, then you go ahead and accept the risk. Okay, so B is the right answer. And of course, if you want to look at what risk assessment is a combination of identification, analysis, and evaluation. That's why B is not the right answer. Okay, next one is looking at the tense. Okay, what exactly is happening here? The most important consideration when developing policies is that management signs off, they are based on threats. Okay, there is consistency with the standards, no significant detail is omitted when you are developing the policies, right? So, and again, this is more like a domain 3 kind of question: policies, standards, guidelines, and procedures. So when you are looking at policies, standards, guidelines, and procedures, basically when you are writing the policy, they should be consistent with the standards that you have. Majority of the organizations sort of so when you are developing a policy, okay, of the four options that you have, I would basically make sure that the policy is closer to the standard, right? Let's say, okay, I will give an example. You are looking at a backup policy, for example. You are looking at a password policy, for example. You are looking at a change management policy, for example, or you're looking at a vulnerability management or patching policy, right? As part of that, of the available options, now map it with standard. Okay, whatever that I was talking about, when I'm mapping with a standard, let's say backup policy, you need to basically choose a backup tape of certain make, right, of a certain version. It needs to be transported in a specific way. Or if you want to look at password policy, the password length should be so much, right? It needs to have, right, multi-factor authentication enabled, blah 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 blah. These are all standards. So when you look at the available option, policy is very closely related to standard, right? And you have not yet developed the policy, right? You are developing the policy, right? So as part of that, what is it that the best answer of the four is C, as in Charlie. Okay, next one is the scope. Okay, when you look at the scope, like a business impact assessment, a BIA, okay, primarily provides information on which of the following: risk to the organization, escalation of loss over time, maximum tolerable outage, organizations vulnerabilities. So basically, when you look at business impact analysis, yes, definitely everything there is risk to the organization. When you talk about maximum tolerable outage, organization vulnerability, right, escalation of loss over time, everything is risk to the organization. But if you want to specifically look at business impact assessment, BIA, right, it basically is option B is the right answer here. Escalation of loss over time. What is it that you are calculating as part of business impact assessment? You are basically calculating the impact against what. So you do basically whether it is RTO, RPO, like if there is a extremely critical asset. Okay, now as part of that, if the asset is very critical, what am I doing as part of BIA activity? I am looking at how, if the asset is not available for 1 hour, what would happen? If it is not available for 4 hours, what would happen? If it is not available for 10 hours, what would happen? And when you look at RTO, RPO, MTO, etc., all of these are basically calculated only basis the BIA. So those are a byproduct. But primarily, BIA gives you the escalation of loss over time, which is impact over a specific amount of time. This is how the questions may come. So please don't get disheartened if you got it wrong, right? Uh, the intention of going through these kind of questions is basically to highlight the fact that okay, this is how the questions can come, right? It will not always be direct. Okay, it would be slightly, roundabout. Okay, next part is roll up answers, right? So the most important consideration when contracting with a service provider is personally identifiable information, right to audit, service levels, escalation and notification. And again, there is only one correct answer. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? We're talking about, gave a hint that it is actually most encompassing, and then you're basically rolling things up. And I gave the hint earlier also when I was giving you the guidelines, right? So here, when you look at option C, which is service levels, right, a service level agreement basically includes information related to right to audit, information related to escalation and notification, information related to KPIs, KRIs, targets, pretty much everything. One single document, which is service level agreement, that includes all of it, right? So the right answer, if you choose C, right, it includes everything. And why? Because C is most encompassing, which includes everything. Okay, so whoever chose C, it's the right answer. Okay, next example scenario is outcome based questions. Okay, an effective security program will do what? Assign roles and responsibility, achieve acceptable impact, standardized risk assessment, develop complete control objectives. So when you look at that, then in fact there are six. Okay, one is making sure that your overall information security is aligned with overall organization strategy. Second one is making sure you are delivering value. Next one is you are using you're making sure there is effective resource utilization. You are making sure performance is measured. You are making sure there is an integration with assurance process. And finally, there is very good integration with risk management, which ensures that the overall organization's risk is always within the acceptable level, right? So that's the reason why the right answer to this question is B, achieving acceptable impact. Okay, if you look at option C, that is also risk assessment, but it is only asking you to do risk assessment. Just doing risk assessment will not help you with anything, right? Making sure that the organization always stays within the acceptable level of risk, that's the goal of the information security program. Your risk is effectively managed, and to manage the risk you can do 1,000 things. You can achieve roles and responsibilities, you could do because you have to achieve the risk with, you have to keep the risk within the acceptable limit. You are standardizing the risk assessments. You could develop control objectives to make sure that you are driving the program correctly, but irrespective of all of that, the primary goal is to make sure you are keeping the risk within the acceptable limits, because you're talking about information security, right? So the right answer for this is B, achieve acceptable impact. Okay, next one, writing it. That's the other scenario that we spoke of, right? Policy compliance is best assured by, okay, a penalty clause for non-compliance, complete acceptable usage policy, regular security reviews, periodic awareness campaigns. So right answer is C as in Charlie. That's the right answer. Performing regular security reviews. So when you do that, you will make sure that policy compliance is best assured, right? Basically, this is where we spoke about, right? Writing is not enough. You have to go verify. Okay. Next point is when a rule is not followed, and then followed up by who is the highest. So when you talk about rules not being followed, this is the one that I spoke about, right? Sales department personnel regularly ignore a policy on leaving workstations unattended after logging in. Basically, they are not locking the system. The information security manager should first do what? Initiate enforcement actions, notify department head of non-compliance, assess the risk of non-compliance, require manager to accept the risk. The right answer for this, right? The right answer for the first question is assess the risk of non-compliance, right? Of course, this is not a school. We're talking about an enterprise. So if somebody is not doing something, if a child is misbehaving, the only way to threaten the child is by telling the child that, okay, I'll tell your father, or I'll tell your complaint to your mother. This is not how it works in office. So if you're telling that, okay, I'll notify the department head of non-compliance, right? Uh, it's the department head's own department members, his or her own team members are doing that activity. So if you are notifying them, what is it that you are expecting that the department head should do? Same is the case with option D, require the manager to accept risk. Okay, what risk should they accept? What is it that they are risking in the first place? If you do not know what is the risk, then you cannot reach anybody. That's why for every non-compliance, the first thing that you should do is assess the risk. First assess the risk, then notify, then either you want to basically, as part of your activity, if you want to enforce some actions, or if you want people to accept the risk, that's up to you. But first assess the risk. Okay, next one is which of the following would be the best sponsor for a major security initiative? CISO, COO, CIO, CTO. As I said, who is the highest? Now this requires a little bit of patience and some kind of, I would say, training. You have to train yourself, go through the content once again. Okay, please make sure that you're doing that. Okay, uh, CIO, CTO, and CISO. are not the highest here. The highest of all the roles which are there is COO, Chief Operations Officer, not CIO, not CTO, not CISO, right? So you will have to make sure that you get yourself used to the hierarchy of an enterprise. It's very important. So go through domain one and make sure you train yourself on that. Okay? Management often not the answer. As I said, right? Management is not always the answer. Classification of information resources is primarily the responsibility of senior management, data custodian, originator of the data, information security officer, right? Not information security officer, not data custodian, not senior management, right? The right answer is originator of the data. Okay, when you talk about data custodian is the person or the team or the department who is responsible to maintain the data. We are talking about classification. When do you classify the data? When the data is originated, as in when the data is created. Okay, that's where it is better and the best rather to classify. So in that case, who is responsible? Responsibility is with the originator, whoever is creating the data. That person is responsible to make sure that the data is classified correctly. And depending on the classification, the data will receive the right kind of the required amount of protection. Okay, to address legal and regulatory security requirements, the information security manager should ensure policies cover all legal and regulatory requirements, adopt international security standards, confer with corporate counsel, assess risk of non-compliance. So the right answer, folks, is D. D as in Delhi or Dubai, right? Assess the risk of non-compliance. Okay, as I said, if you really want to address legal and regulatory security requirements, if you say that okay, you have to do this as per international security standards, no one's going to listen to you. But when you assess the risk of non-compliance, it's a legal and it's a regulatory requirement. Let's say it's like a GDPR requirement, a DORA requirement, right? Or a PCI DSS or a HIPAA kind of a requirement. For such a requirement, if you say that it is important or it's best practice or aligned with it, you will get the best result. No one's going to listen to you because it's going to cost you money. But if you assess the risk of non-compliance, okay, it's a legal requirement. Okay, and let's say if you are looking at it in terms of you have to wear a helmet or if you have to wear a seat belt when you're driving, right? It's a legal requirement. Okay, now if you say if you tell a person that it's best practice, it will save you vis-a-vis. If you don't wear it, what is the risk? Number one, you will get fined. Number two, if there is an accident, you will get injured. When you start assessing all the risks, obviously it will help you the best, right? So that's why it is very important that you assess the risk of non-compliance, right? Now, so those are the questions which I had. Okay, I'd like to quick the thought process that I would definitely encourage that you folks follow. Okay, make sure that you're thinking like a manager already as an information security manager, right? Wherein your goal is to safeguard the enterprise, right? How and what exactly you need to do, or to what extent you have to protect the enterprise, only to that extent as the business wants you to, right? How would you develop policies? How would you take care of legal and compliance? How would you manage resources, right? Making sure that everything revolves around risk management. Okay, how do you communicate risk and communication of risk on a regular basis? That's equally important as risk assessment and mitigation. Okay, so you're periodically reviewing your risk register. You're making sure there is always an owner to risk every single risk as a risk owner. Okay, and make sure that domain 4, okay, it's got 30% of the weightage, only because at the end of the day, whenever you're talking about domain 2, it's about risk management, and domain 4 is basically doing that risk, doing the risk management. And one of the most important element and the maximum amount of time that you would spend within information security is by doing incident management, right? Make sure that you've got a very good plan, very very clear communication plan. You are doing the whole incident management activity, and all the phases of incident management is communicated and everybody is aware of it within the organization. Okay, and remember, if you're not measuring it, if you don't see things measured, then there is no point in doing that activity. Okay, so there should be KPIs. You should basically keep evaluating the performance on a periodic basis, on a regular basis. Okay, keep continuous improvement as your motto. Only then you are basically looking at, or looking and thinking like a manager. Okay, make sure that, coming back to the exam, study smart. Ensure that you are understanding all the concepts, whatever that you are studying. Okay, make sure that you're practicing the questions well enough, whatever question banks that you have. Some of, the areas which I would basically look at is these. Okay, CISM review manual, because whatever is the latest version, I remember is it's 16. Okay, you have the question and answer databases, version 10, version 9, both are good. Okay, if you have attended any course from ISACA, those CISM review courses, any other third party, like for example, InfoSec training, please go through that exam content and the training, whatever training that you have received. Okay, if you think that this entire thing is new to you, ensure that you are having a proper group and study together. Okay, rest all whatever people generally recommend, create a group, prepare a plan, do a schedule, prepare a schedule, stick to that schedule. Make sure you're not taking chances, because this exam at the end of the day is expensive. So that's all I have to add. And there is only one um, so there is no mobile app that I would recommend, Ashok. Yes, for practice, you'd find a lot of stuff available on, your Udemy practice questions are there. There are a lot of these, right? However, you will have to go to the practice questions only and only if you are confident that your understanding of the concepts is good, because people in each of these forums where they provide you these questions, right, 600 questions, 1000 questions, 2000 questions for xyz amount of money, there may be repetitions, and there may be a few questions which they will get the answers incorrectly, right? So if you can differentiate a right answer from a wrong answer, then definitely yes, please by all means go ahead and use those apps and those question banks and practice tests. Otherwise, till the time you are 100% sure that yes, you are getting the right answers, and you got the concepts right, after going through Isaka material, uh, I would say please refrain from it, because what happens is whatever that you learned, right, you may start unlearning it. Okay, so that's what I would say. And finally, most important aspect is, if you are already having a certification or two within Isaka, make sure that you attend the webinars of Isaka, right? Stay updated with industry trends. there may be a question or two which they will test your knowledge on what's happening in industry, as in general, because this particular subject in particular, right, it is very very theoretical, right? There is very little technology here. This is not cyber security, this is information security. And because this is managerial oriented, there will be a lot of questions which would be theoretical, and even the manual also is very very theory oriented. So make sure you are following the industry trends, what is happening in the industry, right? So wish you all the very best for preparing for the exam, right?